And
Cedric, are you going to advance the slides? Or?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so just tell me. All right, man.
Okay.
This is Chris Stokes, so we're going to talk about Canada.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for inviting me. Really appreciate the opportunity. I love to talk about Canada. I love Canada. Love to talk about it. Love to share a little bit about it, and hopefully bring you guys some new facts that maybe you don't know, and a little bit of insight that you don't know. So yeah, just to reiterate on my background, grew up in Toronto, which is the largest city in Canada. On Lake Ontario in the province of Ontario. Went to high school there, then went to college there, University of Toronto, and never thought that I'd leave Canada. I had no desire to, but joined a company that actually moved me to Boston, lived in Boston for a couple of years. Then that company merged with another company that moved me to Wichita, Kansas. And then down to can you guys hang on for just 1 minute? My dog is barking here. I'm sorry.
Jolene and Josh and is he back? Oh, he's back. Okay.
Okay, there I am. Yeah, my dog is doesn't take to be alone very well.
Oh.
Anyway, so I moved to Wichita, then moved me down to I joined another company that moved me down to Dallas, and then joined another company that moved me over to California. So I've been here in the States now for about 30 years, actually longer here than I did live in Canada, which just actually happened. And now out in California with my kids and my wife. And interestingly enough, Cedric and I have a lot of things in common. His son is in Wichita right now, so there's not too many people that can stay.
As an offside thing, I need you to call me later and tell me some cool stuff about Cedric.
Okay, definitely.
Oh gosh.
Definitely can do that. Definitely can do that. Yeah, we'll sit down and we'll chat about that.
All right. Coffee.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it's funny, Chris, that my daughter actually lives in Dallas now.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh God, the synchronicity is unbelievable. So anyway, yeah. So I live, as Cedric mentioned, I live in Aliso Viejo. I've got 3 daughters, wife, and I work in the technology industry. I worked with Cedric at Sprint for a long time, then at T-Mobile, and now I work with a company called Cogent Communications. Been involved in technology pretty much all my life. But I'm not here to talk about me. I'm here to talk about Canada. And before I go to the next slide, I'll ask you, Cedric, to kind of move the slides here. Thing about Canada is it's very close. A lot of people maybe know about it or think they know about it, but there's some uniqueness to Canada, and there's a special relationship that it has with the United States, which is very important to Canada and very important to the people of Canada, and has influenced its development over the years. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then I want to talk a little bit about growing up in Canada. Although I went to high school when you guys were there quite a long time ago, and I'm sure a lot has changed. Hopefully, I give you a little bit of insight as to what it looks like.
Chris, real quick, before we actually started recording, you said that the French Canadian language is significantly different than the Parisian French.
Right.
But what is the predominant language in Canada? Is it French or English?
Well, Canada is an officially bilingual country, English and French. And it was founded by both French and English speaking people back in the day, and it evolved as a purely bilingual country. That causes some tensions. It also causes some pretty interesting dynamics and some pretty interesting cultural things that are important to it. It's a little bit different than here.
And you said you do not speak French Canadian, yet you went through school and high school. Was that all English then?
No, well, I went through high school in English. My high school was in English. However, we were required to take French up until grade 11, I believe it was. And I just unfortunately did not have the. My feeling is that this is my feeling is that is that people either have an affinity for languages or they don't. I don't. So I found it very difficult and wasn't able to pick it up. Now, interestingly enough, I have my three daughters. Two of them actually took French at Elisa Niguel High School here and graduated with French with passed their courses in French. My daughter in at UC San Diego is actually taking French down in San Diego right now. So they seem to have a little bit more of affinity for it than I do. So.
And what was the University of Toronto? Was that English?
That was English. Yes, that was English. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I see something. You put something up here. Okay, there you go. So if you maybe if you wanted to just advance the slide there to 1.
Oh, what happened there? That shouldn't be in there.
There you go.
Well, that's strange. That should not be. Are you
That
seeing
wasn't-
Trudeau?
No, I'm not. I'm seeing the Rotary Youth Leadership Awards.
And Ryla is
Oh,
out.
that's odd. Let me go ahead and stop the share and see why that's happening. That's very odd. Let me stop share and make sure I got the right screen to share. Make sure I share this right screen. Huh, that's very odd that Ryla is up there. Let me see why that is happening. Let me move this whole thing over here then. And let me- Okay, now let me figure out what's going on with my buttons. Share. And we're going to share screen. Share screen.
Well, Chris, while he's doing that, quick question of
Yeah,
in high school,
sure.
You're saying you only spoke English and it's bilingual up there. In
Mm-hmm.
your high school experiences, then was it a little bit limiting in your opportunities to take out pretty ladies or?
Can you
Well,
see it now?
Yes,
now I
yes.
can. Yes, there you go. There you go.
Let me see if I
Okay.
can advance it. I got Life in Canada, and then how about Trudeau? Did that show up
There you
now?
go, Trudeau. Yeah, there we go.
Perfect.
Let
Okay.
me get back to your question in just a minute here because
Sure.
I think I have an answer for you. So,
Okay.
so as I mentioned, growing up in Canada, the United States is a very big part of the relationship. You can't get away from the United States when you grow up in Canada, and there's a number of reasons for that. But this is a quote that I always liked from Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who was the Prime Minister back in the 70s when I was in high school. And he came up with this quote and said that living next to you, meaning the United States, is something like sleeping with an elephant. No matter how friendly and even tempered is the beast, if I can call it that, one is affected by every twitch and grunt. That's the relationship that Canada has with the United States, because the United States is so economically large and so has so much going on and is so big in comparison to Canada. Canada feels every burp and exhale that happens in terms of trade, in terms of culture, in terms of foreign policy, all of that type of stuff. So the Canadian US relationship is extremely important and extremely powerful for Canada. And one of the things you have to remember, and I'll mention it a couple of times probably in this presentation, is that the population of Canada versus the United States it's extremely small compared to the United States. Population of Canada is about 38 million people, which is about the size of California. California is about 39 million. I think Canada is about 38 million, something like that. So population of the United States is enormous, and the economic power of the United States is enormous, and the influence the United States has is enormous. So Canada does have a lot of impact when the United States makes decisions. So let's just go. The next slide. I'm just going to go through a couple of little history slides here about Canada and talk a little bit about it. So, 1776 is a big date for the United States, obviously. 1867 is a big date for Canada. That was the date of Confederation, when what they call Confederation, when Canada started to come together. It was as you can see on the side there, it was kind of a work in progress, right? Like the United States, it evolved in the same way. It didn't all come together at once. It has evolved over time. What you see here is a political map of Canada. It's a little, I apologize, it's a little bit kind of blurry, but Canada is divided into 3 territories and 10 provinces. Provinces are like states. And so basically you could just say they're a state versus a province, same thing. Ontario and Quebec were some of the maritime provinces, they call them the maritime provinces here, Nova Scotia and New Brunswick were the first ones to join Confederation early on. And then over time, they added more and more provinces as more population came over and more people, inhabited different parts of the country. The other part of Canada are what they call these territories, which are these 3 areas at the top here: the Yukon Territory, the Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. And Nunavut was, as you can see, was founded or was separated into its own area as recently as 1999. So Canada has it's certainly not static. There's been a lot of change over the years, and a lot of evolution in terms of how it's structured and how it works with the various people around the country. If you go to the next slide.
Hey, before you do that, so
Yeah.
if I look at like you talked about this Canada being about the size of California. So if I break up like our states like Iowa or Rhode Island and so on and so forth, where would these fit? None of them are going to be as big as Texas, obviously, so we know that. So what size would be like Ontario if you were looking at another state here in the US?
Well, Canada is the second largest country in the world after Russia in terms of landmass.
Okay.
But if you look at, say, Quebec in terms of landmass there, that would probably be as big as Texas. Ontario would probably be, as big as California in terms of size.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought Canada in general was about the size of California. I thought that was kind of odd. Okay.
No. Canada in terms of population is the size of California, but in terms of landmass, second largest country in the world.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
That clarifies things. Cool.
And these provinces, if you look at these provinces, you see some very large ones here: British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, blah, blah, blah. You have over here on the side, that's really hard to see, Prince Edward Island, which is about the size of Delaware over here. And then you've got some of these smaller ones here, like Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, maybe the size of New York, something like that.
So often I hear Canada, I hear Toronto, for instance.
Yeah.
Where would that be located at?
Toronto is right down here at the bottom. You can see it down here, right on Lake Ontario. It's right across the lake from Buffalo. Buffalo's on the other side. So if you look at the bottom of Ontario here, right at the bottom of Ontario, Toronto is there. You can
see it.
Barely see it. Yeah. So Toronto is a lot of people know Toronto in Canada because Toronto is the largest city. It's the largest city. It's the biggest economic city engine in Canada. It is the kind of a driver of technology, a driver of economics. It's the New York of Canada, if you will. So it's loved and hated, just like New York is loved and hated down here. So a lot of other people don't.
So in 2 years, just so you guys know, the Rotary International Conference, right now it's in Australia. Next year it's in Singapore. The year after it's in Toronto.
Oh, cool.
We plan on going out and checking that out.
Oh, definitely. I really recommend going to Toronto. It's a beautiful city, a lot of fun, a lot of stuff going on. Anyway, just to give you a little bit of background, a little bit of a brief timeline here of Canada. I won't go through all of these. You can read them just as well as I can. But if you take a look at the the early people here, were from the early descendants came across the land bridge from Asia into North America and populated it way back when. The first Europeans that came over were the British. And the British claimed Canada like they claimed the United States for themselves. And the French came not too far after that and came in and claimed areas as well in Canada. And then they set up a for a couple of hundred years they set up a mutually antagonistic relationship between French and English in Canada. And eventually that ended up in a war that happened in 1763 where the British beat the French and in Canada, as well as they were beating the French or fighting the French over in Europe as well back in Napoleon's time. And so, but they did it in Canada, and the de facto leadership of Canada became English, British. Now, unlike in some places, they didn't expel the French because of the French had a great deal of economic power. There was a lot of trade and stuff like that so they incorporated the French into Canada. They collaborated with them and developed a society where they established here in 1791 Upper and Lower Canada. Lower Canada was Quebec, is basically Quebec, and Upper Canada was Ontario. So we're talking about those two areas were the first ones that were developed in Canada. So these are the two areas that are right over the St. Lawrence River there, right over Lake Ontario, and they were kind of the first spots of Canada. Obviously, during this whole time, the United States was founded, right? And so that was an important factor in the development of Canada. When the U.S. won the Revolutionary War, there were a lot of English people that were living in the United States that didn't want to stay there. So, like the Ukrainians or whatever, they got out of Dodge. They left the United States and they came up to Canada where they felt that they were going to be safe. And they were called United Empire Loyalists. So these are people that were once the Revolutionary War was won by the United States, they decided they were going to come up to Canada, and they started to establish themselves in Ontario and Quebec. So as you know, and you probably studied or you're going to be studying soon, and soon after that there was the War of 1812, which was between Britain and the United States in Canada, and that caused a lot of there was 2 years of fighting there where there were tremendous amount of battles and back and forth between the U.S. and Canada. It's a small war in the grand scheme of things, but it was very important for Canada because it helped establish Canada as its own country, really, at that time. That was really the first thing that defined it as a country, if you will. The Americans came in, burned my city, Toronto. At the time it was called York, but you guys burned that first and burned it to the ground, and then we went into Washington and burned Washington. So payback. so but at the end of the day, it was resolved after a couple of years, and the relationship started to build after that, on a really collaborative basis, really. But it wasn't until 1867 when actually Canada was established. The British North America Act, which was an act that was done in British Parliament, started to found an actual country and bring the countries together. And it wasn't until 1931 that actually Canada got its full independence from Britain, which surprises some people because that was not all that long ago. And then finally, we got a constitution. We wrote our constitution in 1982. And in 1982, really, although realistically, we were separated from Britain pretty early on in terms of our day-to-day lives and governing. It wasn't officially separated from Britain until 1982. And this is not unusual. It does seem like the timeline took a long time, but for other members of the British Commonwealth, we're a member of the British Commonwealth, which is an organization or an association of states that used to be British colonies, like Australia, New Zealand, Jamaica, that type of thing. We didn't do a hard break with Britain like you guys did, like the United States did. We had a collaborative relationship for years and years and years, and it was a happy parting, if you will, when we decided to actually establish ourselves as a separate and distinct country. So
did that happen in 1982 or 1931?
well, it was a process, right? So basically,
Yeah.
in 1931, we got maybe probably 50% of autonomy. But I think but back in 1931 or 1935 or something like that, Britain could have impacted us with laws. They could have passed laws in their parliament that would have affected us, that would have that could have done something. Now, what happened was that they didn't do that. They basically left us alone, but they still could have exerted control if they did. What happened during the First and Second World Wars was you saw that was another important thing for Canada, the First and Second World Wars, because as members of the British Commonwealth, we went to war immediately upon Britain going to war, which was before you guys did in both of those wars. And so our soldiers were conscripted. They were not conscripted, but they were drafted and went to the First World War and the Second World War. It was those two wars were pretty significant for Canada in terms of the amount of losses that we took, and that started to get the politicians and get people thinking that we really need to start to do our own thing, right, and not be at the beck and call of another country.
Yeah.
And so those for certain provinces in the Second World War, Newfoundland is one. This is why one of the reasons that Newfoundland actually came into Confederation, and they didn't come into Confederation until 1949, after the war, was because so many of their working men were killed, and it was such a small province that it devastated the economy. It ruined the economy in the Second World War because huge numbers of people were killed, and they were unable to support themselves. So they decided that they better join Canada and then throw their lot in with us. Why don't we go to the next one? So here's a couple of kind of fun facts and a little bit about Canada, and then I've got a little pop quiz for you as well. I want to ask you here. So as I mentioned, Canada is a pretty big place. It's the second largest country in the world. It's got provinces and territories, as I mentioned. The provinces are the kind of the lower ones. The territories are those ones in the north. About 38 million people. About 90% of the population is within 100 miles of the U.S. border, and that's very important. That's all down here. So this is where most of the people live, down here, and that most of the reasons for that is, well, a couple of reasons. One, it's warmer, and two, it's economics. That's why people live near the border, because the U.S. and Canada are the largest trading partners of each other, and that's where the commerce and that's where activity is going on. The other thing, as you can see, is there's actually 6 time zones in Canada. Here, I know we have in the United States. There's I believe 3 on the 3 in the the largest part of the United States, obviously Hawaii and Guam and all of that type of stuff, but there's actually 6 in Canada. There's a Western time zone, Mountain time zone, Central time zone, Eastern time zone, Atlantic time zone, which is all over here, and then Newfoundland has its own time zone, which is only a half-hour different, which is a little bit weird. They actually have a half-hour difference from the other their next door time zone. They're a little, so that's a little bit of something that unique. But here's my pop quiz. So looking at this map, besides the United States, and this is for the kids. I won't let the adults answer this one. So I'll let you kids chance to answer this one. Besides the United States, which country do you think is closest to Canada in terms of miles away? Any idea?
You're asking Siri right now.
Well, I'll give it to you. A lot of people might think it's Denmark, which owns Greenland up here. This is Greenland. A lot of people might think Russia, which Russia is over here. But there's actually 2 small islands called Saint Pierre and Miquelon that are right down here near Nova Scotia that are about 12 miles from Canada, and they're still owned by France. They're still administered by France. And so they're right down here by Nova Scotia. They're these 2 little islands that are basically just rocks on the just rocks. But I said, what about America? I said besides the United States. So yeah, the United States is obviously the closest because we butt right up against it. But yeah, France is another one. But that's indicative of the relationship between France and Canada and the relationship that we've had over the years. It has become. It wasn't that once the British beat the French, they kicked them out or subjugated them or anything like that. We developed a country where we tried to coexist with what at one point been our enemies. And although there's tensions, and there is a lot of tension, not so much now as there used to be, but tension between French-speaking parts of Canada and English-speaking parts of Canada. And I should clarify that as well. When I say that Canada is officially bilingual, it is. However, most of the people that speak French are in the Quebec area, in Quebec, or in bordering areas in northern parts of Ontario, sometimes in Manitoba, and in the area you see here is Quebec. That's where most of the French people are focused. You can very much get by without speaking French in Toronto or in any parts of other parts of Ontario, or if you go over here to British Columbia, Alberta, there's very little French spoken, but it's mostly centered here in Quebec. And Quebec has, over the years, become very protective of the French language there, and they've adopted a lot of laws and restrictions on how English can be used in Quebec, and they're trying to promote the French language and protect the French language, and so that causes some tensions between the English speakers and the Quebecers as well. Okay. Let's go to the next one real quick. Just real quick, I'll just talk a little bit about government so you have to kind of understand that. Canadian government is based on British government, much in similar ways to the way the U.S. is, and it has a very similar structure to the U.S. with some very important differences. It's a parliamentary constitutional monarchy, where after 1982 the King of England does not have any real power, but is more of a figurehead, more of a something to part of history more than anything else. But there's a role in Canadian government for the British representative. That's a governor general. We have a governor general who is the Crown's representative, the British representative in Canada. And there's a relationship there, but it's not a relationship where the British British Parliament or the British Prime Minister has any power over what goes in Canada. The head of the federal government is the Prime Minister. That's like the president. That's much like the UK, United Kingdom. There's opposing parties. They're called the loyal opposition, and there are multiple ones in Canada, as opposed to the two political parties you have here. There's about 5 that are in Canada, and that's very much like other parliamentary systems, like in Australia and France and Italy and England, where you have multiple parties. And what that does is it causes some uncertainty sometimes in how political elections are resolved, where you have parties that maybe a minority party, a smaller party that has to get together with another party because they can align themselves and cause some problems to the government. So it's a little bit dynamic. The elections are held. They're not held in a schedule like they are here, where I believe it's, what is it, the first Tuesday in November, whenever it is. The elections are held between 4 and 5 years, and actually the government actually decides when the election is scheduled. So they have to call an election, but they could schedule it. And then the provinces, like the states here, are governed by premiers, and it's the same model as the federal government. Like the prime minister, premier is like a prime minister of the province. There is also, what you're seeing here on the right at the bottom is the House of Commons. This is where this is like the House of Representatives, I would say, for the United States. This is where a lot of but it's a little bit more powerful body, perhaps, than the House of Representatives. We do have like England, where you see some nepotism is in the Senate. The Senate in Canada is appointed as opposed to elected, as it is down here. And so that's where you sometimes see patronage from the prime minister, who will try to pack the Senate of people that are friendly to him or her. Bills must be passed by. Bills are basically come out of the House of Commons here, and then they must be passed by the Senate. Historically, the Senate was more of a kind of a rubber stamp kind of thing. But now it's become a little bit more contentious sometimes. But it's what you see in Canada in terms of the institutions and the political structure and the educational system and everything, really, is a mixture of Britain and the United States. Basically, what Canada has done is kind of looked at both and tried to incorporate features of both into all of their structures. There's a Supreme Court like there is here, and so it would be the structure, although it's a little bit different in how they're elected and how the prime minister becomes elected, but by and large, it's a similar type of system. Okay, let's go to the next one. A couple of fun facts here. Like the Constitution that was developed in 1982, that we didn't have an actual official national anthem. It wasn't official until 1980, although it had been around for 100 years. It was actually officially, Canada was officially given to Canada as the national anthem in 1980, structured by the government. The relationship is between Canada, you see down here on the left here, is not just oil, but we are the biggest supplier of oil to the United States. A lot of people think about Saudi Arabia and various other parts of the world, but actually Canada is. And the economic trade and interaction between the two countries is enormous. There's a ongoing trade in all sorts of different commodities, and that's a very important part of the relationship, obviously. The border between Canada and the United States is the largest demilitarized border in the world. There's, if you've ever been to the border, if you ever come over to Canada, you'll see it's very long, and there are areas where you could just step on one side, put one foot on the one side and one foot in the other, and nobody would ever see you. But there's a lot of interaction across that border. Very, as I mentioned, Ted, 90% of the population is down by the border. The rest of the country is water and lakes. There's or water and trees. There are tremendous numbers of forests, tremendous numbers of lakes in Canada. Fresh water is all over all over Canada, and so you've got a large forestry industry. You've got a tremendous amount of fishing and water sports and all of that type of thing that goes on, and that's an enormous part of Canada's culture too. Is that love of the land and love of the wilderness, if you will. There are two national sports. Everybody probably knows hockey is a pretty big Canadian thing, as you can see, but lacrosse is also a national sport of Canada. It was done, people from the First Nations were big lacrosse players back way back, and that's something that Canada adopted, and both of them are played, as well as curling too, which is another sport that I've participated in too. That's another big sport in Canada. If you go to the next one.
Yeah, on the border question, do
Yeah.
they have the same types of political push as we do in the US with respect to one group saying no border, another group saying, yes, let's get a border?
Well, there's tension about it. Yes. I mean, there's tension about immigration. Canada has historically been a little bit more lenient in its immigration policies than the United States has, I guess. And it's fairly well targeted, I guess, if you will. Canada has decided that they have a very targeted way of getting immigrants. First of all, they want immigrants. That's from a governmental, cultural, point of view. They encourage immigration. One, because the population is so small, right? I mean, we're still have lots of areas to fill up, and we have lots of jobs to fill and lots of things to do. So we have encouraged immigration. The other thing that is part of Canada's ethos, if you will, is multiculturalism. Where the country tries to embrace other cultures and allow them to do their thing, if you will, and not try to subsume them, if you will. So that's a good thing and a bad thing, right? It causes tensions as well as it does allow other cultures to flourish within Canada. So you see in Toronto, if you go to Toronto, you can go to Little Italy, and then you can go to India, Little India somewhere. They have a very robust Chinatown, huge Pakistani area in Toronto. Every race, creed on the planet is reflected there, and they can express themselves and do their thing fairly benignly. But again, it does cause some tension as well. Okay, so now in terms of growing up in Canada, now you got to remember that I grew up there quite a long time ago, so things may have changed. I'm sure they have changed a lot, but we are, we're a lot like you guys, and the way the structures of education are very similar to what's happened in the United States, or what's been developed in the United States. But it's a mixture of British policies and British structures, U.S. structures, and then immigrant influences as well. one of the things to think about with Canada is in terms of how it relates to the United States is not thinking about from east to west, but thinking about it from north to south. If you look at north to south, if you look at the West Coast, for example, the people and the structures and the infrastructure and everything on the West Coast in British Columbia over there are very similar to the West Coast in the United States. A lot of the political opinions are the same in terms of the West Coast. Again, if you look at the middle of Canada, in the what they call the prairies there, that's very similar to the Midwest, right? So you really see these similarities between Canada and the U.S. if you look at them north to south, in terms of the people, in terms of the political beliefs, in terms of the economy, and everything like that. If you look at they call it the Maritimes out in those Atlantic provinces, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, very much like Maine and Massachusetts and Vermont. And Ontario is very much like New York State, and that type of thing. So that's where you sort of see the similarities come between the two countries when you look at it north and south. And the experience in growing up in Canada is obviously much like here. If you grow up in a rural area, it's very different than growing up in a city. And you see that in Canada as well. If you grow up in a smaller town, it's a whole different ball game than where I grew up in Toronto. In terms of school and where you guys are, we had an elementary, very much like where you guys are now. There's an elementary school, middle school, and a high school. Now, fun fact, when I went to high school, there was actually a grade 13. You actually had 5 years of high school.
That
Yeah.
explains a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it does explain a lot. They got rid of grade 13, and now it mirrors what you have down here. So you only have 4 years of high school. But yeah, thank yourself lucky that you didn't have to do 5 years of high school. You only have to do 4.
Chris, is that you as the hockey player there in the picture?
No, I wasn't as good as her.
It's
So
her. Oh,
yeah, I wasn't as good as her. But but as you know, hockey is a huge part of Canadian life. Winter sports in general are a big part of Canadian life, and it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, the temperature is a lot colder up there, so you have hockey, you have curling, you have skating, you have all of these things that happen in the wintertime. And it's not just it's not just something that people say. Hockey is pretty huge. It definitely is.
Sorry.
Oh no, go if you go back one quick one there. Let's go back to the previous one. In terms of universities, when you go to university, and again, a lot of people. Some people don't go to university, but a lot of people go from high school to university. Most of I would say like 95% of the universities in Canada, this is a little bit different, are public universities. Each province has its own university, and they're all public. There are very few, very few private universities there, as opposed to here where you have private universities everywhere. So most people go, if you stay in Canada to go to university, you're going to a public institution. So that's just something I wanted to point out. Okay, if you go to the next one, and some other differences here between the two countries. So the metric system. Now, this was something that was introduced to Canada when I was going to school, when I was in high school. They developed, because we used to have the imperial system like you do here, feet and yards and all that kind of stuff. But then they instituted the metric system back in the 70s, and so I had to kind of learn that when I was going to school, which was kind of interesting. But that's a fundamental difference between our two countries. We also use English spelling, British spelling of words. So you're going to see if you see a Canadian spelling something like favor or center or those types of words, they have a little bit of a different spelling than you have down here. we have the single payer universal health care there, as opposed to the privatized system that's down here, which is a little bit different, and that basically allows you to go to a doctor without paying anything when you go for basic care, that type of thing. 1 year maternity leave. This is something that happened after I left the country, and my wife would have appreciated that when she had her kids, but they actually have mandated 1 year maternity leave when you have a baby, which is kind of interesting. A couple other things. Milk comes in bags. Now we do have milk in cartons like you have down here, and in plastic bottles, but seems like Canada is the only place where you can get milk. You get milk in bags. You basically you see that 2% bag over there. There's 3 bags of milk in there. You take one of the bags out, you stick it in a container that every Canadian household has. You clip off the corner, and you pour your milk out. That's very uniquely Canadian. So remember that. And then the other thing what was very, very important to my family was Kinder eggs. Now, Kinder eggs are something that they're actually developed. I think they're a Swiss chocolate, and they come with this little egg here with this chocolate egg that you can eat, but there's a toy inside them that you actually assemble. It comes in, and they're amazing. It's like it's incredible that they can come up with all of these little toys that can fit inside this Kinder egg, and actually it's so small, but they're so unique. But they're actually banned in the United States. Because people choke on them, apparently, although nobody in Canada has ever choked on them, but they have been banned in the United States. But this was when I took my kids over to Canada for the first time. We got them Kinder eggs, and we tried to bring them back, and we actually got them confiscated by the by the border at the border, because they are illegal. And so if you ever go to Mexico, you can get the Kinder eggs. You can get I think every other country in the world, but that's a very important part of the difference between our
Chris,
two
the
countries for my
1 year
family.
maternity leave, is that
Yeah.
only for the female or both for the mother and the father?
It could be the mother or the father. I think it's one or the other. Yeah.
One or the other.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's one or the other. Yeah. And then also, just one other thing I'll just talk about real quick is I had a bullet there in the last slide. You don't have to go back, but just Canada consumes a lot of American media. So in terms of music, in terms of movies, and TV and all of that, Canada is a big consumer of American media, and so that's we're very in tune with what's happening down in the U.S. in terms of the media landscape. The movies that open in Canada or open in the United States open in Canada. We have American television stations that I grew up with from Buffalo. I could see all the American television stations. So that's a very much of a dynamic, is that we see what's happening down here a lot, and we are able to consume a lot of that media. So we're very aware of what's going on in the United States, whereas opposed to Americans who maybe aren't as aware of what's going on in Canada because they don't have that access to various media outlets. Okay, let's go to the next one. In terms of holidays, little bit again, you see here when you look at the different holidays, we're kind of the same structure as you, with a couple of different tweaks, right? So we have the same holidays like Christmas, Thanksgiving. Our Thanksgiving is a little earlier than yours. Ours is in October. It's the same day as Columbus Day. Is Canadian Thanksgiving Day. It's always the same. That's the same. I think it's the second Monday in October. And it's a harvest festival, but we don't have any pilgrims or anything like that, but it's a harvest festival, and we eat the same food in terms of Thanksgiving, turkeys and pumpkin pie and stuffing and all that type of stuff. And some of the other holidays are very similar. So you have New Year's Day, obviously. Victoria Day, which just happened, is like this weekend. It's like Memorial. It's sort of the start of summer. That's the weekend before your Memorial Day. And that's a kind of the unofficial start of summer. 24th of May, they call it. Canada Day is similar to the 4th of July. Canada Day is on July 1st. 4th of July is on the 4th of July. But again, that's the founding day of Canada. So it's a very similar type of holiday. We also are good at inventing holidays. August civic holiday was something that was invented. Yeah, we invent a lot of holidays. After I got out of school and got out of Canada, they came up with all sorts of different holidays that they've added. But August civic holidays, they didn't have a holiday in August, so they decided to invent one. It's the first Monday in August, so everybody gets a day off. Labor Day is Labor Day. Remembrance Day is it's on the 11th of November, so similar to down here. And then Christmas Day, and then we get another day called Boxing Day, which this is a British invention, and this is the day after Christmas. So our Christmas is a little bit it's a bit of a longer holiday than Christmas sometimes down here. Our Christmas is more like your Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is a travel, is a big travel day for Americans, and that's a day that you see a lot of people maybe going to visit relatives that aren't around there. Christmas is like that for in Canada, because there's an extra day that's tacked on afterwards that allows a little bit more freedom for people to get around and about. So. And then if you go to the so there's a lot of similarities, a lot of differences. If you go to the next one here, we've got a couple of things that you may not know that were invented by Canadians. If you back one, previous, yeah, a couple of things you may not know, and I'll point out a couple of them here. One was basketball. Basketball was a Canadian invention, and a lot of people don't know that, but it was developed by a teacher in, I believe it was in Saskatchewan or Manitoba, who developed it as a recreational thing for kids that he was teaching. Put the peach baskets up on a board and threw a ball through it, and that was basketball. Couple of other things. Insulin was actually discovered by a couple of scientists at my school, University of Toronto. Peanut butter, which hopefully you guys take advantage of, because I love myself some peanut butter. IMAX Films. IMAX is a Toronto company that came up with IMAX Films. And a couple of other different things in there that I thought were kind of interesting, a little different. The paint roller, I didn't even know about the paint roller, but that was that one I'm pretty proud of. I've used a lot of paint rollers in my time. And then if you go to the next slide, we've got a couple of famous Canadians. Some of these people you might know, the couple of Ryans there. A couple of people I'll point out here. One is the football player down there is Laurent Duvernay-Tardif. I don't know if you know him, but he was a member of the Kansas City Chiefs when they won the Super Bowl a few years ago. And he's actually he's from Montreal, and he's a doctor. He's studying to be a he was studying to be a doctor at the time, and he left the Chiefs to go back to Montreal to work in some hospitals during the pandemic, and gave up his position on the Chiefs after winning the Super Bowl, and took up his residency up there. Really proud of him. He's a tremendously interesting guy, very, very powerful speaker, has some very important things to talk about sacrifice and what he did and what he saw during that when he was working in a hospital with a lot of elderly patients during the pandemic. And it was he's somebody to really listen to if you ever have a chance to read anything that he's written or hear him speak. Then you got some other people like Justin Bieber and Drake and some other folks. Drake actually went to my high school as well, long after I graduated. You got the two Ryans as well. And then I'll make a shameless plug for somebody who's not really famous, but on the bottom left here is my daughter, Olivia Stokes. And she's not famous, but she is a surfer. She's a competitive longboard surfer. And she is just recently qualified for the Pan American Games in longboard surfing, which will happen in Chile in October. And she represents the Canadian team. She's on the Canadian team for surfing. So What we're hoping is that she will do well down there, and if she sticks with it, and our fingers are crossed that they add longboard surfing to the Olympics, that we hope that maybe she'll be in the Olympics for Canada in Los Angeles, when it comes to Los Angeles
That's
in
awesome.
2028.
And she went to Aliso Viejo, right?
Yeah, Lisa Nagel. Yeah, all my kids went to Lisa Nagel High School. They're all dual citizens. My wife is also a dual citizen. Fun fact about my wife: her maiden name is Dion, Dion, and she is in fact related to Celine
Marcel.
Dion.
Oh.
Very, very, very many steps away from her, but Dion is like Smith in Quebec, so there's a millions of them. But she is related to her, and so she's also a dual citizen, and all my kids are as well. But all my kids surfed, but Olivia's the one that really took it up and is doing pretty well with it. She's actually in Virginia Beach right now, this weekend surfing. So
Very
she's
cool.
in a competition surfing. So.
Very cool.
And
the last
then
one.
that's basically it. Just a couple other things, if you want to learn more about Canada, you can always call me. But there's a couple of different sites here that I thought might be of value to you. Canada.ca is a government site that is full of good information about Canada. National Film Board is nfb.ca, where you can see a lot of information about Canadian films. Canadian geography is always what it is. CBC is Canadian Broadcasting System. That's the television and radio broadcasting organization up in Canada, which is tremendous and has a lot of information. EduCanada, some information about for kids. TSN is sports. TSN is the sports network in Canada, so that's where you can find out about how Canadian teams are doing. And then writers, if you're interested in authors and writers, Scribendi is a great one, and Music Canada for those that are interested in music and finding out a little bit more about Canadian music. And that's it. That's basically my spiel.
Well, I'm gonna appreciate it very much. I'm gonna also ask the guys, because I always like to hear one thing that they learned or liked or didn't know about, that kind of stuff there. So I'll turn it over to the group and let them share their thoughts. And I'm gonna switch slide groups here for a second here, but let's hear about it, guys.
Or
What'd
any
you learn?
questions
What'd
at
you
all?
like? Yeah,
Any questions at
questions.
all?
Let's start picking on you. You know that.
Uh,
Jolyn, is that you or is that Joshua? Joshua, go ahead, bud.
one thing I learned is that Canada is split up into provinces. I didn't know that, and I also didn't know there was one called Quebec.
There you go. Yeah.
I thought that was a country.
No, that's a problem. It's like a state. It's like well, I guess Quebec is probably closer to Louisiana than anything else. That's where the French influence is in the United States, but it's a some place, that's for sure.
William?
One thing I didn't know was that kindrags were illegal here. I absolutely didn't know that.
Well, it's important to know. So if you're ever outside the country and you see a Kinder Egg and you want to bring it back, you better be careful, because they do
Get
confiscate
busted.
them.
She was
Yeah.
busted by smuggling a Kinder Egg.
Kinder Egg, yeah.
prison.
Exactly.
Yeah, somebody in prison is going to say, "What'd you get here for?" You say, I murdered somebody. You can say, "I stole the Kinder Egg."
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think you got no chance in prison.
Yeah.
How about you, Jolyn?
Yeah, I have a question about Canada's school system in high school. For high schoolers, when does your school season start, like semester?
Oh, good question. Very similar to here, in terms of the traditional way. It starts at Labor Day, after Labor Day in the fall, and I believe that I actually ended up going. I think it's changed. Is that they've actually shortened it a little bit. I think it now kind of ends at the beginning of June, but I actually I went right to the end of June almost when I was a kid, but I think they've shortened it up a little bit. So it's now sort of early June when it ends. And it's you do a Labor Day, you do kind of a winter, it's kind of 3 terms. It's like, Labor Day to Christmas, New Year's to midwinter break, they call it, and then the final term. So there's like 3 in high school.
Very cool.
Good question.
Chris, other than the sports, what did you do for fun in high school and middle school?
Let's see. In high school and middle school, I did sports was my primary thing. I played on the football team. I played rugby. That was something. I was also on the badminton team. We had a badminton team. I was on that. I was a big movie guy. My brother was in a band, and I helped him in his band. So I was doing that and going to helping him. I was kind of a roadie, I guess, if you will, or semi-manager. So I helped him do that. And I wasn't a big skier, but I did a lot of skating, not just for hockey, but also pleasure skating. There's some great skating trails and stuff like that I did.
So the proverbial question John always asks is that you guys have high school dances?
We did.
Well,
We
John
did.
always wants to know, did you have a prom?
Oh, yes, we did. We did have a prom. Yes, we had a when I was at school, we called it a Sadie Hawkins, and I
Oh
think
yeah,
you guys have
Girls
a
Ask
similar.
Guys.
Yeah, with Girls Ask Guys. That was, I think, in the fall, I want to say. Then we'd have we called it a formal. It wasn't called a prom. We never used the word prom, but it was a formal. And that was the kind of the end of school thing. Yes, definitely. 100%. Yeah. Again, very similar in a lot of ways.
Very good. Well, I promise these guys get out at
Yeah.
8. They start at 8 or 7. So anything else from you guys? Any other random questions and stuff? This will be on our website, of course. And Joel, I don't know if you have anything for your team, if you've got new members or new folks lined up. I will let you guys know that if you're interested in how Lake Forest became Lake Forest, next Tuesday night, or the 6th, whatever date that is, the 6th Tuesday at the sports park, let your parents know too, because this is a good one. The very first mayor of Lake Forest is going to talk about how they built the city. Because remember, El Toro started back in the 1800s, and then in 1991 it became Lake Forest, and obviously there were a lot of things going on between that. But you'll hear names like the Serranos and Avilas and La Cañadas and a lot of different folks there. Geronimo's, a lot of the names that pop up that you drive down their streets and things like that. So if you're interested, go to the website, whatever it is. But we've sent out a lot of material on it. But it's going to be the 6th of June, which is the Tuesday at the sports park, 5:30 to 6:30. I think your parents would really enjoy meeting the people that actually created the city of Lake Forest.
Yeah.
And then on the 7th, if you guys are available, from 4 o'clock to 8 p.m., but you don't have to be there the entire time. We're going to have our first opportunity to go to the farmers market. And thank you to Jolene's dad. He helped us get these really cool recyclable, reusable shopping bags that we're going to give to people that come to the park. So if you guys could be there, that'd be great. You could help us. You could talk about what Rotary is, meet individuals, collect some names, and pass out bags. So that's 4 to 8 o'clock at night. You don't have to be there the entire time, but it's at the sports park. And again, that's on Wednesday. So Jolene, do you have any new people that joined your group, or?
Yeah, 2 of my friends from Boston says they can join, but because of time, they said they'll have to see because of school. But I think definitely July and August, they definitely can join because they're out of school. But for now, they said the time's a little bit late for them.
Sure, got that. And then have you picked out like your vice president or anything else like that at all, or?
Yeah, I did send out an email, and hopefully everyone can pick up a role on that.
Okay, good. All right, cool. All right, well, if there's nothing else, guys, thank you, Chris, man. I'm looking forward to catching up with you live at some point.
Yeah, we'll do it 100%.
And congratulations to Liv and the family. I'm still trying to figure out, there's not a lot of surfing going on, I guess, in Canada, but she's figured out a way to really make it happen. So, and all that good stuff. We'll be watching the Stanley Cup again. Sorry you're going to miss it.
Yeah, thank you. Same with St. Louis. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I got it. All right. John,
you guys.
everything
Really
you do.
appreciate
Thanks so
your time.
much.
All right, guys,
Bye.
be good. Thanks, man. Take care.
Thank
Hopefully
you,
we'll see
Chris.
you guys next Tuesday at the Lake Forest event.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way,
That'd
the
be good.
parade, if you guys are interested in being in the parade, 4th of July parade, we're going to be marching. And you are welcome to. In fact, I encourage you guys, to come out and march with us on the 4th of July parade. It'll be at Lake Forest. I'll get more information, get it over to John. He can pass it on to you. But it's a 2.5 mile walk. But we have like Wonder Woman's going to be there on our team, and Superman's going to be there on our team. We'll pass out candy. We'll pass out beads. We'll be walking and marching and just kind of having a good time. So if you've never been in a parade, this is a great chance for you to be in a parade, and you get a chance to see all the people waving to you and stuff, and it's kind of fun. But you'll get a chance to represent your Interact program right at the parade. And your parents can join you too if you want, and your brothers and sisters and so on and so forth. All right, guys. Thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Bye.